Welcome to the Whiskey Jug. My name is Josh, and today we are tasting a fun little thing I received in the mail from the folks at Laphroaig, and it is the 2014 Laphroaig Cairdeas. You might be looking at this like, ooh, why does it come in a little flask? And that's actually, it was kind of neat. They sent me that instead of, like a little sample bottle. So it was a pretty cool way to send it over. But that's besides the point. That's neither here nor there. What's important is this right here. Now, it's no secret that I'm a fan of Laphroaig, and no secret that I'm a fan of the Laphroaig Cairdeas, especially last year. Now, for the 2014, what they used is the Amontillado casks. I'm going ahead and cheating a little bit here with the fact sheets. And what that did is it gave it a totally different taste, a totally different feeling. And if you look, just look at that color difference. This is yellow. And you look at this one, and that beautiful purplish, rubyish, delicious. This is, without a doubt, this is one of my favorite whiskeys I've had in recent years. And this thing was fantastic. And so, really, that's kind of what this whole review is going to come down to: is how does this stack up? Well, let's take a look. Well, I guess a sniff. Let's take a sniffy sniff first. First thing you notice is this is Laphroaig, like just without a doubt. All of those big peaty islands, they all have a very signature smell. Ardbeg smells way different than Laphroaig, and Laphroaig smells way different than Bowmore. And Bowmore smells way different than Lagavulin, and vice versa. They all have just a very key and signature smell to them that really makes them just wonderful and adds to that complexity. That's one of the things I really, really like about whiskey, is just the fact that you start with just the same ingredients: malted barley, burn a bunch of peat, which then, the heat from that and the smoke stops the malting process on the barley, and all that peat, that smoke, gets trapped into the barley and it goes through the distillation. And even though they basically go about the same way, they're basically distilled the same way. The whole thing about them is relatively similar. Of course, there's differences in distilling techniques, and when they pull, do they use more of the heart of the run? Do they add any heads and, any of the heads and tails, the feints, any of that stuff. It does change it up a bit, and then how their wood programs, the barreling, and where they get their wood from, etc. Like it all changes the end quality of the ingredient. But it's just, to me, it's absolutely fascinating the way that it all comes together in the end. But anyways, enough of that rambling. Let's get on to the whiskey. There's no doubt about it. That is Laphroaig. It's just incredible. There's something very interesting in this one, and it's a characteristic that I've never really found in other Laphroaigs, and that is a milky kind of a quality. It's got a very milky caramel, and that's kind of sitting in there with the brine and the smoked meat and all of those other wonderful, wonderful sweet and a little bit of savory spices in there. There's like a citrus custard in there, some cinnamon, definitely some malt. You can kind of smell a little bit of the wood influence in there as well. There's just a touch of it, just something, a little bit earthy, a little bit woody in the background. But that Amontillado, cask really adds such a different dynamic to the Laphroaig that you typically don't get. And I've got to say, on the nose, I'm not loving it as much as I love the Laphroaig 10. Definitely not as much as I love the 2013, which is just an incredible, incredible bottle. Yeah, it's fantastic, but just not quite. There's just something just a little bit off. That little bit of milkiness kind of throws me off a little bit. So let's see how it tastes. I just love it. It's really good. There's a peat, the ash, and that same milky sweetness that just kind of butts up against those earthier flavors. Cocoa. There's a little bit of cocoa in there. A little bit of cinnamon, some leather, some charcoal. It is very like coal and ash and burnt notes driven, and then you get these really strange, the cocoa and that milky caramel sweetness. In the regular Laphroaig, it's a little bit more vanilla driven. There's a lot less of that kind of milky character to it than I'm picking up here. And it's kind of like in my head, it's going at war with each other. I just love that color too. That yellow is just amazing. But I'm having a hard time with this one just a little bit. It does have a good balance to it though. It still has a decent balance. There's the way that milky sweetness butts up against the charcoal and those types of flavors really, really help it out. Has a good medium body to it, and for being cask strength, I mean, this one clocks in at 51.4%. What was last year's? 51.3. So it's actually 0.1% more or higher ABV. It's remarkably drinkable at full cask strength. It's without having to add any water to dilute it, which if you did, it would also expand and open up. And before sitting down to do this, I did pour a little and add some water and found that that milky sweetness does kind of open up more, does dominate a little bit more, and those little tiny woody characters still, they pop up a little bit more. Other than that, it kind of relatively stays the same. The nose, though, gets far more powerful with a little bit of water than it is here at full cask strength. Now, but yeah, beautiful texture, nice and soft. There's a little bit of bite from the high ABV, but remarkably drinkable at full strength. And if we're talking about finishes, this is a very classic Laphroagian finish. So you got a lot of that peat and char, some good smoke coming through. It has a very nutty, malty sweetness, so kind of a leathery cinnamon thing happening. And there's a little bit of that milkiness to it, the little milky sweetness that I find just a little bit distracting. If you haven't picked up by now, it's something I keep coming back to, is that it's a little bit distracting, that milky sweetness that is popping in and out, but it's still delicious, and that's kind of the whole point. So when we're talking about the comparison between last year's and this year, it doesn't have quite the depth, it doesn't have quite the complexity as the 2013, and that milky sweetness just kind of throws things off just a little bit for me. Still delicious, still fantastic, still a Laphroaig. So honestly, I don't have a whole lot to complain about. Something I absolutely would look forward to coming home to after a long day, and something that I wish I had more than about a quarter of a flask left. But yeah, fantastic stuff. Well done, Laphroaig. And that's it for me. This has been the Whiskey Jug. I'm Josh, and cheers.